Namaskar and welcome to this Mythology live episode. You can ask me many questions here. Debunking mythology, Sathology means science of truth or study of truth. Opposite of that is mythology, which means science or study of fake lie imagination. आज मैं अपने स्टडी में बैठा हुआ हूँ और आपसे अफ्रीका के बारे में बात करूँगा. This show is in Hindi, and those of you who would like to see in English, you can get my book also. You can read from the book, Cold Glory and God. And this book is selling very well in Africa also. So, Africa, जो जब हम अफ्रीका के बारे में सोचते हैं, when you think of Africa, the European propaganda has been the cradle of civilization. And we have seen that happening, that how Africa has always been the source of wealth. अफ्रीका हमेशा एक धन का स्रोत रहा है यूरोप के लिए, and we have seen that happening. So the theory क्या है, anthropological story है, that the life originated in Africa and spread all over the world, and people will assume why this is being said. Now, the main reason why this was being spread by the Europeans was to emphasize to the European people that how Africa is important to be colonized by us. ये क्यों बोला उन्होंने कि अफ्रीका क्रेडल सिविलाइजेशन है? So that the Africa becomes open for the European explorers to be colonized by the Europeans. So there is a narrative, there is a strategy, and there are tactics. African Union, nowadays I'm very happy with the African Union that they are actually resisting all attempts or removing all colonization attempts actually. As an author, I can only make qualified statements with references. But there are some inferences need to be drawn. Some conclusions need to be drawn so that we can actually put the truth coming out of the data, right? Data science is very important. Like how to construct a story out of a given data. किस तरह से अफ्रीका के बारे में बोला गया कि अफ्रीका ही विश्व की सभ्यता की शुरुआत है, लेकिन उसका असली अर्थ क्या था कि हम अफ्रीका के साधनों को किस तरह से हथिया सकें, ये मेन पॉइंट था. तो global civilization starting from Africa is as illogical as Darwin's theory of evolution. Darwin's theory was just a theory. अगर मैं बोलूँ कि डार्विन के माता पिता बंदर थे, that will be the truth to say. लेकिन हमारे तो नहीं है, हम लोग तो जानते हैं. So according to Vedic version, and that is a fact also, that life came on the entire planet together, not just in one place, came on the entire planet at the same time. But Europeans spread the thing that the humanity started from Africa to justify colonization of Africa. Now this is a much later century, much later. History of colonization of Africa goes much before, and that's what I'm going to say. Or if you look at Ramayana, वाल्मीकि रामायण जो है अफ्रीकन को कुशान बोलती है. कुश की टेरिटरी, लव और कुश आपने सुना ही है, लव और कुश. तो लव को थोड़ा सा भारत के पास की जगह दी गई थी, जैसे लाहौर को बोलते हैं. कुश को और भी पश्चिमी दिशा में दी गई थी, क्योंकि अयोध्या से पूर्वी दिशा में राज चल रहा है और पश्चिमी दिशा से कुश का शासन चल रहा है. सारे पिरामिड्स का आप लाइफ टाइम देखेंगे तो त्रेता युग से जुड़ जाता है सारे पिरामिड्स का. तो हजारों साल पहले भी, thousands of years ago also, Indians looked at Africa with reverence. For them, Africa was a place which was the land of Sri Ram. और सी भारतीयों का अफ्रीका की तरफ देखना एक अलग तरीके से देखना है, और यूरोपियंस का अफ्रीका की तरफ देखना एक अलग तरीके से देखना है. उनका देखना है कि किस तरह उसके साधनों को यूज किया जाए. भारत का देखना है कि किस तरह से अफ्रीका जो हमारी सभ्यता का पार्ट है, रामायण का पार्ट है, वो किस तरह से समृद्धि बना रहे। अभी आजकल कंडीशन बहुत ख़राब है अफ्रीका की। बहुत सारे यूट्यूब चैनल्स आप देख सकते हैं जहाँ पे लोग जो हैं बार बार अपने जो उनके जो कॉलोनियल मास्टर्स हैं उनको क्वेश्चन भी कर रहे हैं। और इस्लाम का हिस्ट्री में मानने वाला हूँ मैं ज़रा, बट दी बार बार उसको क्वेश्चन भी कर रहे हैं कि किस तरह अफ्रीका का जो इतिहास है वो गलत तरीके से लिखा भी गया है, पढ़ाया भी गया है, एंड ऑल द लैंग्वेजेस ऑफ अफ्रीका लॉस्ट। अमेरिका अफ्रीका में ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा लोग इंग्लिश बोल रहे हैं, but there is no attempt in within Africa to learn to write or read or produce literature in their own local languages. You know, the richest country in the, if you look at South Africa, the richest country in in African Union also uses English as an official language, and it is also cutting off. So we have to have, unless we want to reject colonialism, we have to remove the language and the religion. Too many Bible preachers roaming in Africa. Same is the problem with India. Too many Bible preachers roaming in India. Too many Bible preachers in Africa, which is a threat to Africa actually, because they're going to take away the land. Now, coming back to the facts now. Now, east coast of Africa, right from Egypt down till the entire Mozambique and other areas, down till there, Zimbabwe. Now, those are actually very closely connected to India. Trade, spice trade. Ethiopia is a very good example. Ethiopian food, other than the non-vegetarian food, the spices are very much affected from India. And the ancient Africa was one of the most prosperous lands. See, if you look at just before 12th century or 11th century, Europe was very poor. America was, Europeans had not acquired America or Canada. They were all poor nations. The richest continents in the world were Asia and Africa. These are the two richest continents in the 12th century. Obviously, in Asia, the richest place was India. Well, not India, Bharat. Bharat was, entire Asia was called Bharat. It was the richest area in the 12th century. Now, the Africa used to produce the maximum amount of gold and precious stones. Maximum amount. And it used to be sold in India because India was the biggest market. And Indians used to exchange medicines, spices, jewelry, and education. Yeah, this is the history. Now, east coast of Africa is the cradle of African civilization because it is closeness to India. Now, in the northwest coast of Africa became rich. Northwest, you all know Algeria and all the Ghana and other places, Ivory Coast. Those areas became rich because of the trade in the gold rush and also minerals and oil. जो उत्तरी पश्चिमी दिशा है उसमें because of the gold rush and minerals and oils. So now when we talk to the native population, जो वहाँ के मूलभूत निवासी हैं, अगर उनके बारे में बात करें, उनका कहानी पूरी दुनिया में एक जैसा है ना? और जितना भी नेटिव कम्युनिटीज है अफ्रीका का, they have close connection or resemblance to Sanatan Dharma because of three things. Number one, the thing is acceptance of Atma as the main thing in the body. Secondly, Paramatma, Sanskrit we call Paramatma, but they call it divinity spread all over the world. The second. Number three, after death, the soul leaves the body and goes to another body based on its activities in this life. Karma. Very common. But the Europeans thought of this native culture as backward and uncivilized. Because what is civilized according to them? If you follow their Bible That means you have a chance to become civilized. Otherwise, there is no chance to become civilized. And so, Europeans saw Africa as a place of humans with less developed brains, and the Indian explorers thought of Africa as the source of, as the extension of their own society. Very common. Most of the racist attitudes in the India also came because of European textbooks, but that is not a fact, because the pyramids, they tell you a story. पिरामिड्स बताते हैं कि द अफ्रीकन सोसाइटी बहुत ही ज़्यादा डेवलप्ड सोसाइटी था. There were only two continents rich in the entire world in the 12th century. One was Asia, another was Africa. No other continent was rich. Every other continent was suffering. South America to some extent, but not as rich as Africa. So the Europeans ने क्या किया? If you look at the strategy of, it's called the narrative. First of all, they had very little idea about their own exploration. They did exploration for their own population to justify their expenses. They started putting out theories to invite the fellow citizens to these lands, and that's how they can make economic profit. This was the main purpose of explorations. Discovery period was a discovery period for the church, because in Europe they could manage, so the discovery period was extended to other countries so that they can loot the other countries or other continents. You know? So they came up with many theories through their scientists. One is the all the continents colliding, India moving away from Africa, and the Africa is floating, as if they assume that there are islands floating on the ocean. Is that true? No. If that was the case, then submarines should be able to go inside the continents and go to the other side. It doesn't happen. It would have been such an easy communication, easy way of travel, that you don't have to cross through the southern port of Africa and go away. Not possible. But it is not happening. If the reverse is there. So many similarities between the Vedic culture and the ancient African culture. Number one is pyramids. Pyramids is the name of a geographical construct. If you look at the old pictures of pyramids, I don't know how I can share on this one, because there is no way I can share here. So I do not know if I want to, I know how I can share on this one. I'm on a different computer, so I don't know how to share on this one. But if I show the pyramids of Egypt, दिखाऊं मैं इजिप्ट और ज्योमेट्रिकल डिजाइन्स जो मंदिरों के दिखाऊं मैं, तो आपको बड़ा आश्चर्य होगा कि मोस्ट ऑफ द पिरामिड्स का जो ऊपर पार्ट है, जो अभी चपटा दिखाई देता है, उसके ऊपर मूर्तियां बनी हुई थी, अर्च विग्रह था. वो ऐसा चपटा नहीं था. उसके ऊपर मेन मंदिर बनाया जाता था, जैसे गुम्बद बोलते हैं या कुछ और बोलते हैं. गुम्बद तो इस्लामिक टर्म हो गया, लेकिन उसके ऊपर बनता था एक मंदिर, अर्च विग्रह या समथिंग टू वर्शिप ओवर देयर. द पीपल यूज्ड टू क्लाइंब ओवर देयर. वो सब हटा दिया गया. कब हटाया गया? 13वीं शताब्दी में, 14वीं शताब्दी में, 15वीं शताब्दी में. उसके पहले था उधर. और जो उधर फराओ जो नाम होता है, फराओ, उसका असली अर्थ होता है पिता. इन अफ्रीकन लैंग्वेज फराओ का होता है पिता, फादर. और उनके साथ जो जो गाड़ने का जो वो है पद्धति है, क्योंकि ये लोग राजा भी थे, संत भी थे. दे वर द राजा एज वेल एज संत. सो तो देयरफॉर जैसे भारत में भी सन्यासियों को गाड़ा नहीं जाता है, सन्यासियों को जलाया नहीं जाता है, सन्यासियों को गाड़ा जाता है, क्योंकि उनका अंत्येष्टि उनके मरने से पहले कर दिया जाता है. तो इसलिए सन्यासियों का बहुत रिस्पेक्ट किया जाता है, बिकॉज they are already attained the spiritual status while living. तो वो ये नहीं चाहते, उनका ये कोई आइडियोलॉजी नहीं था कि लोग वापस जीवित होंगे, नहीं, दे विल गो टू अनदर लेवल। ये उनका फिलॉसफी था नेटिव का। मैं आऊँगा अभी इस्लाम का हिस्ट्री पे और क्रिश्चियन के हिस्ट्री पे, लेकिन सबसे पहले ज़रूरी है कि हाउ नेटिव कल्चर ऑफ अफ्रीका was extremely advanced. The टेक्नोलॉजी और साइंस में आप देख ही सकते हैं कि किस तरह उन्होंने मंदिर बनाए, हाउ बिग वर द टेम्पल एंड हाउ द टेम्पल्स आर सिचुएटेड एट ए प्रॉपर geographic coordinates, एंड जो ह्यूज स्ट्रक्चर्स बनाए हैं वो आज भी, आज की यूरोपियन कोई भी साइंटिस्ट बता नहीं सकता कैसे बनाए इन्होंने, बिल्कुल नहीं पता उनको। और ये सभी जो स्ट्रक्चर्स हैं, दे आर द सिंबल्स ऑफ कर्म और पुनर्जन्म। कर्म पुनर्जन्म बहुत ही इंपॉर्टेंट है, जिसको यूरोपियंस बिलीव नहीं करते हैं पुनर्जन्म में। अभी वो भी चेंज किया रिसेंटली उन्होंने, क्योंकि वो भी चाहते हैं कि वन लाइफ ही रहे, एक ही लाइफ रहे, ताकि सारा पैसा जो भी है वो उनको एक लाइफ में उनको मिल जाए लोगों का। तो द लास्ट फराओ जो इजिप्ट का था उसका नाम था अमासिस, आमोस, और नील से लेके ग्रीस तक उसका राज था। His rule was, Amasis का राज was from Nile river to Greece and some places like today's Iraq and also perhaps still Central Africa. ये उसका घर। तो उसकी डिफीट हुई साइरस के हाथ पे। साइरस was the ruler of Persia. His name was Cyrus and he was Zoroastrian ruler of Persia. और the most of the African states, they respected the ethical, spiritual and trade leadership of Pharaoh, Egypt Pharaoh, his father. And Western universities Pharaoh के बारे में बिल्कुल बात नहीं करती हैं, because the moment they talk about Pharaoh, then this the entire thing gets vanished. The entire episode, their cultural superiority actually diminishes. They won't talk about it. You know? So now coming to फराव, अगर हम फराव के सिंबल्स देखें, अग्नि, स्नेक, फिश और अग्नि के फायर सैक्रिफाइस, ये सारे हिंदुओं से मिलते हैं, सारे के सारे। So the European culture, they disconnected India from Persia, from Egypt, but in the old world, in the 12th century or before 12th century, they were all connected. All of them were connected. All of them had a common basis, and the basis was the Vedic culture. Now, the Africa का जो destruction है, that started after the rule of Pharaoh. तो यवन, ग्रीक्स मतलब यवन, ये if you look at the यूनानी या यवन, यवन मतलब जो लोग वेदों के हिसाब से नहीं रहते हैं और अपना ही कुछ ना कुछ मानसिकता से चलते हैं और जो वेदों के विपरीत काम करते हैं, वो सब यवन है, डिस्ट्रक्शन करते हैं बहुत ज्यादा। तो ग्रीक ने सबसे पहले नॉर्थ अफ्रीका में, क्योंकि अब फराओ का रूल ग्रीस तक चल रहा है, तो उसके माध्यम से ग्रीक्स आए नीचे, और उन्होंने जब लास्ट फराओ मरा, उसके पहले नहीं, दे स्टार्टेड कंट्रोलिंग नॉर्दर्न अफ्रीका एंड एस्टैब्लिश्ड अलेक्जेंड्रिया इन इजिप्ट, अलेक्जेंड्रिया। उसके बाद रोमन्स आए, उन्होंने कंट्रोल किया अलेक्जेंड्रिया को, क्योंकि इजिप्ट was the main point of conquest of Africa for Europeans and Turkish. ये दोनों important है, and also Bedouin एशिया के। और जो इजिप्ट, जो आज का इजिप्ट दिखता है सूडान तक, इजिप्ट जो था नील नदी के स्रोत के नीचे 800 मील तक था। रियल इजिप्ट was around 800 miles south of even southern Sudan. means almost coming till the Central Africa. This was the position of Egypt. And तो आजकल का अगर लैंग्वेजेस देखेंगे देन यू विल फाइंड आउट दैट व्हाट आई एम सेइंग इज ट्रूथ. क्योंकि लैंग्वेजेस के हिसाब से अगर हम देखें तो वो सारी ये लैंग्वेजेस जो इस एरिया की मैच करती है एंशिएंट फराओ का लैंग्वेज से, जो कि इसके अंदर बहुत सारा अरमाइक लैंग्वेज का पार्ट्स है. अरमाइक लैंग्वेज भी इजिप्ट के नील नदी की एक लैंग्वेज है. वो मिडिल ईस्ट की नहीं है, वो इजिप्ट की है. और जो एंशिएंट इजिप्ट है, अफ्रीका है, उसमें 1500 लैंग्वेजेस इज स्पोकन अक्रॉस अफ्रीका. उसके नाम भी आपको बताता हूँ, जो आपकी यूरोपियन क्लासिफिकेशन बताता हूँ, क्योंकि हम लोगों को पता लगे कितना गड़बड़ी किया है इन लोगों ने. तो दी एफ्रो एशियाटिक, जो कि भारत से कनेक्टेड है. नीलो सहारन, वो भी भारत से कनेक्टेड है. आपको बहुत सारा आश्चर्य होगा. नीजर कॉन्गो, वो भारत से कनेक्टेड नहीं है, वो लोकली जनरेटेड है. नीजर कॉन्गो भी बंतु, वो भी लोकल है. जैसे भारत में बहुत सारी लैंग्वेजेस हैं, लोकली है डिफरेंट पार्ट्स में. या इफ यू आर टॉकिंग अबाउट अफ्रीका, तो बंतु इज अ लोकल लैंग्वेज. देन खोइसान, खोइसान भी लोकल लैंग्वेज है खोई ट्राइब्स का. और एक बोलते हैं ऑस्ट्रोनेशियन. ये बहुत ही गलत है. मतलब वो क्या बोल रहे हैं कि ऑस्ट्रेलिया की लैंग्वेज नहीं. वो सदर्न टिप्स पे अगर आप देखें ट्रेड तो चलता ही है. तो ये जो ऑस्ट्रेलिया के जो अबोरिजिन्स हैं, वो उसमें से बहुत सारे जो अबोरिजिन्स हैं वो भारत या अफ्रीका से के ओरिजिन से है. तो इसलिए वो लैंग्वेज का पार्ट्स आपको दिखता है. कनेक्टेड वर्ल्ड, 12th सेंचुरी. तो यूरोपियन डिस्कवरी पीरियड इज जस्ट ए प्रोपेगेंडा. दिस इज नॉट डिस्कवरी, इट्स कॉल्ड यूरोपियन डिस्ट्रक्शन पीरियड. तो अभी 640 कॉमन एरा, 640 कॉमन एरा, ये एक्चुअली हिस्ट्री जो लिखा गया है वो ठीक नहीं है. मैंने 640 इसलिए लिया कि ये बताने के लिए क्या गलत लिखा गया है. 640 कॉमन एरा में अरबों का इन्वेजन शुरू होता है फ्रॉम नॉर्थ ईस्ट अफ्रीका, क्योंकि अरब कॉपी कर रहे हैं. तो जैसे ग्रीक है, रोमन है, अभी ग्रीक और रोमन को हटाने के लिए अरब आ गए. एक्चुअली ये इन्वेजन शुरू हुआ 900 कॉमन एरा में. ये पूरा इतिहास बहुत ही रिसेंट है, कोई भी ऐसा नहीं, कुछ एंटिक्विटी यहाँ पे कुछ है ही नहीं. और रिलीजियस कॉन्केस्ट है अरबों का, मुसलमानों का. और उम्मयद डायनेस्टी से शुरू हुआ. जो आप देखते हैं ना उम्मा, द वर्ड उम्मा कम्स फ्रॉम उम्मयद डायनेस्टी. उम्मयद ये पहली डायनेस्टी है इस्लामों की, इस्लामिज्म की. और ये एक वॉरियर ट्राइब है, बिदुइन है. बिदुइन, बिदुइन मतलब कबीले. और इन्होंने साउथ वेस्ट रीजन है अफ्रीका का, उसको उन्होंने कॉन्कर किया. और ये सारे पाथ ऑलरेडी ग्रीक्स और रोमन्स ने बनाए हुए हैं. ऐसा नहीं कि इन्होंने कुछ नया ढूंढा. ग्रीक्स और रोमन्स भी यहाँ जहाँ से गए थे, ये लोग भी वहीं से आए. क्योंकि आप कभी इस्लामिक इतिहास देखेंगे, इन्होंने नया चीज को भी आविष्कार नहीं किया. ये दे हैव यूज्ड द एग्जिस्टिंग पाथ्स. और इन्होंने सब सहारा में बंतु भाषा के लोग रह रहे हैं. और सब सहारा लैंग्वेजेस ऑल स्पीक बंतु बेस्ड लैंग्वेजेस. एंड खोइसान, खोइसान लैंग्वेजेस दे आर स्पीकिंग. सो आज का जो समय है, 42% अफ्रीकन्स जो नॉर्दर्न अफ्रीका में है वो इस्लाम को फॉलो करते हैं. और 49% जो है क्रिश्चियनिटी फॉलो करते हैं. मतलब नेटिव अफ्रीकन कल्चर तो कहीं पे है ही नहीं. 42 और 49 नेटिव कल्चर्स को दोनों के दोनों रिलीजन खा गए. जो भी एक यूरोपियन, एक मिडिल ईस्टर्न. एक्चुअली दोनों मिडिल ईस्टर्न है. तो डेस्मंड टूटू का लैंग्वेज है earlier they had the Bible, we had the land, now we have the land, they have the Bible. तो दी इस्लामिक कॉन्केस्ट में सबसे पहले अगर आप देखेंगे आर्ट कल्चर, तो स्लेव ट्रेड है अफ्रीका का, वो शुरू हुआ एक्चुअली इस्लामिक कॉन्केस्ट. तो उन्होंने क्या किया अफ्रीकन्स को स्लेव बनाकर they started bringing from Africa to north to the Middle East. So before Islam came Christianity. Alexandria रोमन्स के बाद क्रिश्चियनिटी आया और इन द क्रिश्चियनिटी में क्या हुआ अलेक्जेंड्रिया जो कि नॉर्थ ईस्ट कोस्ट इजिप्ट पे है नॉर्थ कोस्ट पे मेडिटेरेनियन में उन्होंने अलेक्जेंड्रिया को क्रिश्चियंस ने हथियाया फ्रॉम रोमन्स एंड लैटिन एंड ग्रीक स्पीकिंग पीपल ऑफ अलेक्जेंड्रिया वेयर दे स्टार्टेड स्पीकिंग अबाउट फ्रीडम ऑफ रिलीजन वहां से अलेक्जेंड्रिया और इजिप्ट से इन्होंने बाहर कर दिया इन्होंने बोला कि नाउ देयर विल बी ओनली चर्च there will be only church and the church will not allow any other local religion to function in the area so all other religions local religions are banned you know so nobody can practice their own culture and religion ये क्रिश्चियनिटी ने शुरू किया और उन्होंने within 20 years Alexandria which was the richest city because of Christianism it became the poorest city 20 years only and financial and culturally because of Christianism the entire Alexandria vanished for trade which Romans and Greeks had prospered the Romans and Greeks were not religious fanatics they were the same problem was they used to destroy the local cultures but they used to focus on free trade and free their whole goal was making money their goal was not religious in any way but within 20 years Christianism brought Alexandria to be a very poor city today आप जाके देखेंगे it is a very poor city of Egypt and Roman Catholics अभी आप if you go to Vatican वहां पे आप म्यूजियम में जाएंगे तो आप एक कॉप्टिक क्रिश्चियंस का बहुत सारा म्यूजियम का थिंग्स मिलेगा वो सारा रोमन कैथोलिक्स का है and the people from Egypt did not accept Roman Catholicism so they continued following their own religious cultures people from Egypt and they did not accept the monotheistic ideology क्योंकि it's very commonsensical कुल देवता कुल देवी फैमिली ट्राइब के देवता देवी it's an old Vedic concept सनातन धर्म का concept very common the problem with the Roman Catholicism is कि they try to अभी भारत में भी बहुत जगह बहुत सारे रिलीजन्स अपने आप को बोलते हैं बहुत सारे ऑर्गेनाइजेशन बोलते हैं मोनोथिस्टिक है ना foolish people these are foolish people in Bharat also because the moment you bring monotheism is a European concept you completely go against the culture of Sanatan Dharma we all know संसिद्धि रहितोषणम पूरा सनातन धर्म हरि की सेवा और हरि के लिए ही चलता है सनातन धर्म लेकिन मोनोथिज्म नहीं है यूरोपियन डेफिनेशन ऑफ मोनोथिज्म इज टोटली डिफरेंट इट इज डिस्ट्रक्शन ऑफ द मल्टीपल एस्पेक्ट जैसे कृष्ण बोलते हैं भगवद गीता में कभी भी कृष्ण ने ऐसा नहीं बोला कि आप देवताओं की पूजा ना करें वो बोलते हैं कि जो भी वरदान देवता देते हैं वो मेरे से ही आते हैं लेकिन उन्होंने ये नहीं बोला उन्होंने तो ये बोला कि जब आप देवताओं की सेवा करते हैं तो आप चोरी नहीं करते देवता तो हमारे आराध्य है ये भगवान कृष्ण बोल रहे हैं लेकिन उसको जो मोनोथिस्टिक माइंडसेट वाले जो कुछ लोग हैं उसको मिस इंटरप्रेट करते हैं गीता को और वो दे से समथिंग एल्स बट हियर द मोनोथिज्म एक्चुअली डिस्ट्रॉयज इजिप्ट फर्स्ट इंस्टेंस इन द हिस्ट्री एंड देन आज भी नहीं स्वीकार करते हैं जबकि आज इस्लामिक रूल है सेम प्रॉब्लम इस्लामिक रूल सो इजिप्ट इज डिस्कनेक्टेड जो कायरो जो कैपिटल है आज भी from the mainstream people is disconnected anybody watching from Egypt can vouch for it that the government in Cairo is disconnected from the people of Egypt very clear and I'm not saying based on some fanatic reasoning I'm a Hindu so I'm just saying it from the point of view of analytical reasoning because if you impose something on the people it's going to come back जैसे भारत में secularism is imposed on people and therefore it's not going to function ever. It's not going to happen because there is a inherent bias in the system where the Hindus cannot practice their culture as freely as other religions. So the moment the bias comes in, system is not going to function. System is not going to function at all. And I'm not a political person. I'm writing from a book. So people from Egypt followed a tradition of worshipping nature and their own devata. Deus, you can call Deus, Devta, and Devi. And they enjoyed freedom of thought and enjoyed the freedom of expression. See, my book glorifies Africa like no one else has done. The reason is because I'm seeing from a Vedic mind point of view or a Hindu point of view, but others are seeing it from their community point of view. So, therefore, there is a difference over there. So, church destroyed everything, and Nubia is a place in Sudan, today's Sudan, near the source. Christianism also arrived in Maghreb, which is in northwest Africa, through Rome. And in the 4th century, they say 4th century, but in the 8th century, Christianism was opposed by Egypt by all their rulers who considered Christianism to be a threat to their culture. Very few historians say that. They say that Christianity came just like that. No. Christianism was opposed by most of the people, rulers of Africa. This is the history of Africa. Now, situation is completely different. Now it is in the power in many places. I'll give you an example of Tunisia, which were known as Carthaginians. Carthaginians मतलब जिनका origin कार्थ से है या पर्शिया से. Carthaginians. They fought with the Romans to control Africa's Atlantic coast. And most of these wars, they were initiated by the Europeans and Arabs in Africa. Most of these wars. African history is extremely important for people who are trying to fight to decolonize the world, because Africa is the colonization process still going on. Colonization of India is still going on. Colonization of America is still going on. Colonization never stopped. So whenever one religious sect tries to impose themselves on others, that's called colonization, against the will of the natives. So most of the colonization is referred to as anything Abrahamic being imposed on the native population is called colonization. And when the native population fights for their rights against Abrahamics, that is called freedom struggle. Okay, there are two differences right there, main difference. तो इसको आप लिख लीजिए और लोगों को बताइए भी. तो so the art, music, natural science, culture, Africa was flourishing in ancient Africa. You will find advanced weapons, tools and instruments. मैं अपनी किताब से पढ़ रहा हूँ, गोल गोरी एंड गॉड. ये अमेजोन पे अवेलेबल है अगर आप सेथोलॉजी सर्च करेंगे. Dating back from 70,000 to 300,000 years. And ancient parts of Africa was completely subdued because of these wars. So Africans, they hid their old culture from the Europeans and from the Arabs because they wanted to preserve it. अभी भी है. So therefore, only 20% of Africa is explored till date. Only 20%. सिर्फ 20% अफ्रीका ही एक्सप्लोर किया जा चुका है. बहुत बड़ा कॉन्टिनेंट है. अगर मैं आपको साइज बताऊं कि पूरा का पूरा यूएसए will come in the Sahara Desert. Actually, Australia will come in the Sahara Desert. ऑस्ट्रेलिया यूएस से बड़ा है, यूएस का मेन लैंड से. और यूएसए आ जाएगा, रशिया आ जाएगा, इंडिया आ जाएगा. कैन कम इन द अफ्रीकन कॉन्टिनेंट. इज सच ए बिग कॉन्टिनेंट. और गोल्ड ग्लोरी एंड गॉड, इसके लिए इस्लामिक इन्वेजन हुए, इसी के लिए क्रिश्चियन इन्वेजन। सो रोमन कॉन्केस्ट ऑफ अफ्रीका किल्ड अराउंड 8 मिलियन अफ्रीकन्स। 8 मिलियन, ये क्रिश्चियन कॉन्टेक्स्ट, क्रिश्चियन है। एंड द द मगरेब और इजिप्ट में कॉन्केस्ट हुए, रोमन कॉन्केस्ट, जो कॉन्स्टेंटिनोपल की सेनाओं के द्वारा। कॉन्स्टेंटिनोपल तो बहुत ही बूढ़ा था, मर गया, वो क्रिश्चियन भी नहीं था, ही वॉज ए नेटिव, ही वॉज नॉट ए क्रिश्चियन, ही वॉज नॉट ए मुस्लिम। कॉन्स्टेंटिनोपल उस समय इस्लाम भी नहीं था, तो कॉन्स्टेंटिनोपल वॉज ए एक्चुअली ए नेटिव, सनातन धर्मी को आप बोल सकते हैं, या उस ही वॉज डूइंग इट टू इंक्रीज द वेल्थ, रिमूव द पॉवर्टी, समटाइम्स preserving the culture, or so this is little better form of कि increasing the trade and मैं इसको justify नहीं कर सकता किसी भी तरह, लेकिन trade के लिए कभी कभी you have to bring law and order in situations, so therefore his work was mostly that। उसको मरते वक्त उसको क्रिश्चियन बनाया गया बैप्टिज्म के द्वारा, तब वो जाके अब उसको बोलते हैं कि क्रिश्चियनिटी बढ़ाने के लिए उसका वो जिंदा वो रहा था, बट दैट इज नॉट द केस, ही वाज देयर ओनली फॉर लूट। सो जब कैथोलिक्स ने रोमन एम्पायर को टेक ओवर किया, सो ऑल दीज रोमन लार्जिस, जो रोमन का जो वेल्थ है, रीच द हैंड्स ऑफ चर्चेस इन नॉर्थ अफ्रीका, यूरोप एंड रोमन कंट्रोल्ड बाइजेंटाइन एम्पायर, वहां पहुंच गया। एंड देन अरब्स अटैक द क्रिश्चियन कंट्रोल टेरिटरीज, और उन्होंने अलेक्जेंड्रिया, तो 20 साल में क्रिश्चियनिज्म ने बर्बाद किया। अब इस्लामिज्म आ गया अफ्रीका में, उन्होंने फर्दर अटैक किया अलेक्जेंड्रिया के ऊपर, और नील नदी के सारे शहरों पर आक्रमण किया उन्होंने। फिर रोमन्स ने कैथेगियंस को हराया, बर्बर को हराया। बर्बर जाति जो है वो अफ्रीका के नॉर्दर्न पार्ट में पाई जाती है। अगर भागवत पुराण देखेंगे तो बर्बर का बहुत सारे रेफरेंस है, मतलब बर्बर एक अनसिविलाइज्ड ट्राइब को बोला जाता है, जो कम्युनिटी को बोला जाता है, जो जो रामायण में रेफरेंस है, महाभारत में रेफरेंस है, और अफ्रीका के नॉर्दर्न ट्राइब्स को बोला गया है बर्बर। तो उसके बाद दी रोमन कंट्रोल, तो जो कैथेगियंस हैं, जो इजिप्ट में कैथेगियंस हैं, उनको बोलना शुरू किया यूरोपियंस ने, चर्च ने, कॉप्टिक्स, और बर्बर को बोला डोनाटिस्ट। तो रोमन्स वर डिफीटेड बाय द चर्च, द चर्च को डिफीट किया इस्लामिज्म ने, एंड इस्लामिज्म को वापस डिफीट किया रिसर्जेंट चर्च ने। तो पूरा अफ्रीका नाउ, नॉर्दर्न अफ्रीका हैज बिकम द प्लेग्राउंड ऑफ रोमन्स, क्रिश्चियंस एंड इस्लामिस्ट, तीनों का प्लेग्राउंड है। One is defeating someone else. So first the Romans defeated the tribes, Carthaginians, then the church defeated the Romans, Islamism defeated the church, and then again the church defeated the Islamism. This is the fight going on continuously. And the period is very simple. Period is pre waves of, is still in the Roman period, and church is there, church in this thing. Now the there are many connections to India now in this period. So India remained the source of providing food for the culture. Sanatan Dharma culture, or the Hindu culture, was the food given to the natives to protect them through the trade from India. So Christianism, which was rejected by the natives, Islamism was feared by the natives, Judaism, which originated in Africa, Nile River, were the fighting ones in the entire northern Africa. Now, the Hindu traditions coming from trade from India started shaping the coastal culture, the entire east coast as well as the west coast. People don't understand that. the west coast also, Atlantic Sea. So the city of Punt were was connected to the South India. And for incense, even today you'll see city of Punt having more instances of incense business in Africa. And Sri Lanka used to be also a major contributor to the wealth of southern Africa. Sri Lanka, which was part of at that time, it was all one. Bharat was one. So the African culture, the basis of the native African culture was the Vedic civilization. मैं उसका proof देता हूँ आपको. If you look at the temples, this is the temple door. Okay, I'm reading from my own book, Gold, Glory and God. इसके ऊपर, if you see the lower picture, it had mentioned of all cows. Cows were very important. Cow killing was prohibited. Even if you go to the interiors of Tanzania today, you will see the importance of cows. So 639, 640 May, when the Arabs attacked Maghreb, there was not a single instance of local cow killing or animal killing. So Amr ibn al-Asi, he attacked 640 कॉमन एरा में, ऐसा बोलते हैं, बट एक्चुअली क्या उसने 840 कॉमन एरा में, 200 साल के बाद. ये सारा जो यूरोपियन हिस्ट्री है, दे ट्राई टू प्रूव देयर एंटिक्विटी बाय एडिंग 200 years टू देयर हिस्ट्री. तो इसलिए वो पहले करते जाते हैं, but they cannot do it because the other factors are also very important. This is the foolishness of European scholars which are driven by protecting Christianism. Yeah? So Amr ibn al-Asi, according to Europeans, ये Europeans लिख रहे हैं, not the Arabs लिख रहे हैं. So European history is always written to eulogize or promote their Christianism version. It has nothing to do with facts on the ground. Their researches are all built for propaganda. And therefore, when you study them there, you need to study independent sources also, because you cannot just depend on their version. If you depend on their version, then you will be like the lost youth nowadays. So there were 3 different attacks on Africa in different parts. So 647 Common Era, Abdullah ibn Saad from Medina to Maghreb, there was one attack. So 30,000 soldiers attacked from on Maghreb from Medina and quick. So Maghreb, you can see the map there, Maghreb. From Medina they attacked and across the northern Africa, and they attacked the kingdoms of Ajuran, Bachwezi, Damat, Adal, Alodia, Varsangli, Buganda, Nri, Nok, Nali, Mali, Bono, Songhai, Benin, Oyo, Punuyaka, Ashanti. Ashanti is the name of an empire, also African empire. Ghana, Mosi, Mutapa, and Mapungubwe, Sine, Senar, Salum, Baol, Kayor, Zimbabwe, is a traditional name, Congo with a K, Kabu, Ile Ife, and then Carthage, Numidia, Mauritania, and Aksumit. These are all ancient empires of Africa destroyed by the first Islamic attack. And these are significant. So poverty in Africa so far, so started with Christianism, but now more destructive with Islamism. So ancient city-states were destroyed, significant loss of life and property in these states, and the multi-faith societies of Africa are collapsing now to become the poorest states. So the poverty in Africa that we see today is a result of these Islamism attacks. Nobody will tell you this reason because people will try to hide. No, it is no. Wealth was snatched away, local cultures were destroyed. Now, what is going to be seen? How will the society come up? How will the trade and commerce come up? How will there be a law and order? It will not possible if you destroy the basic fabric of the society. So the Islamism brought poverty through mass killings, conversion. You go to many cities of Africa, will be a big mosque, lot of corruption, and no law and order. Nothing for the people. And the only thing standing is the symbol of colonialism, which is the mosque over there. So what happened, sometimes you will be thinking about human rights in Afghanistan. But what happened to the rights of natives in Africa is a story much worse than any other story you heard of. The kind of attacks, the kind of destruction that happened in Africa, it's much worse than what you can think of. You know? I'll give you some example. Women in Africa were able to move freely across everything, across their society, were leaders, because African societies are matriarchal, where the woman is the leader of the family. But after the Christian conquest, Christianism and the Islamism conquest, they became the second class citizens, where the male domination was imposed. So even today you see the violence by men against women is very high in African continent. And we have seen the history now that the Islamism attacks women and children first. And the American media and American education system thinks otherwise, because the problem with them is they are just propaganda tools nowadays. There's no independent education research thing ever existing in American system now. I'm so surprised the decline of American education is so high that you feel pity on them now, that they are teaching what the British used to teach. So they've gone back to the British roots. Now the real Anglo-Saxon roots are coming out. And I'm not saying going by the color of the skin. Anglo-Saxon is a mindset also. The many brown people, जो brown अंग्रेज हैं, they also think like that. They're brown outside, but inside the education system has made them think even more closer to the Anglo-Saxon. So it's a mindset issue also. So so when the Islamism attacked Africa, the resilience of African society forced them to change their way. You know? So during the first 2 centuries of conquest of Africa, Islamism had to change itself also. That was the strength of the local cultures of Africa. And then uh, the African practice was reformed by personal askia. So the pure Islamic jihad was registered by the native Africans, which led to many wars in the 11th century in every single part where Islamism went. So there are many traditions, many kingdoms, and they resisted Islamic attacks, Islamism, and which led to large scale cold blooded murders. Even today they are happening. You can see many movies made where the people are appearing and killing the villages off. The South Sudan is a current example how much violence is going on. These are all religious violences, all of them. Ultimately for the controlling the trade, but religious violences. So the slave trade was started by the leaders of Africa, and it was uh, given by the local tribes were given to the Islamic military commanders, Islamism military commanders, as a gift. So, wherever the region was forcibly converted to Islamism, and they benefited from the this takeover Africa, and the slave trade flourished. So, slave trade was used as a basis for expanding the, what do you call it? It's a gift. It's a gift. So that was used. That was the biggest attraction. Was used to colonize Africa by few people. So the Hanafi, Hanbali, Sunni tribes, Maliki, Shafi, and Shia were Ismaili, Jafri, Zaidi, others, and then others were Muslims were Ibadi, Ahmadi, Madhavi, and Ghair Madhabi, Al Quran. So these are all the areas. Entire north and northeast of Africa, completely colonized. And the most lucrative part was slave trade. And later on, after Islamism, the some parts of Africa, North Africa, and Northeast Africa was controlled. Whole Africa was not controlled. Africa is a very big continent. Africa, only some parts are controlled. And then, following the Islamic ones, again the resurgence of Christianism happens. Now, Italy, Britain, France, Spain, Portugal, Greeks, Romans, Arabs. Now, so Italy, Britain, Spain, France, Portugal were the main ones. And before them were Greeks, Romans, and Arabs. Now, the, the difference is Greeks and Romans did not destroy local customs, local languages. They are only concerned with the money. Religion was not important. The Christianity that replaced Islam, because I already said first Christianism came, then Islam came, then again Christianism came, was a colonial movement by the Europeans. This is the second phase of colonization. The first phase of colonization was Greeks, Romans, Christianism, Islamism, then Christianism. Now again, European colonialism is now starting to spread Christianity. Understand that the Europeans did not come to improve anybody's life. Europeans came to serve their church and to get more people for the church because that increases donation and it increases help with conversion. Same story which is happening in India. Happened in Africa before, happening in India now, happening in Africa now. And therefore the African Union, West doesn't like, Europeans don't like any local resurgence. They think there's their right to destroy or control Africa with an iron fist. And that's why you'll see African leaders opposing Europeans on their face nowadays using the English language. So, between 1880 and 1930, 1913, 1-3, before the First World War, the whole Africa was divided into multiple small areas on the lines of colonial powers. The whole continent was divided northern white Africa versus southern black Africa. Okay, white Africa, black Africa. And the destruction of natives under European colonialism was drastic. So, and now here, the Muslim groups sold the slaves to Europeans to be brought back to Europe. So the slave trade was like this. Because the Islamism groups, mosques, were experts in slave trade. And they are the ones took the slaves and sold it to Europeans. मुसलमानों ने slaves को खरीदा और Europeans को बेच दिया. This is what happened. You know, so Europe's good relations with Africa was based on this slave trade and diamonds, which was brought along with the slaves. So Bartolomeo Diaz reached the Cape of Good Hope in 15th century Portuguese. And this is the beginning of conflict between Islamism and the new Europeans. And they wanted to control governments for trade. So also beginning of the corruption in the governance in Africa. So it is known as Bartolomeo Diaz. Now, Europeans had already had tasted some success in South America, and the main purpose was to come to India because India was the United States of that century, and probably it will become again also. And then, so my Siri is talking, so please forgive me a little bit. And then I need to stop it. Anyway, so they were looking for easier routes to India. So Europeans were only interested in trade, pure trade. So they used Muslim slave traders to supply them with manpower from the sub-Saharan Africa. So this manpower was used to facilitate European trade between coastal garrisons, because the army camps, and the interiors of Africa. That's why the slave trades were needed. And also the earliest Christian artifacts, Christianism artifacts or conquest artifacts were moved to Rome through this trading post. So names of the looters are John Hanning Speke, Richard Burton, David Livingstone, Henry Morton Stanley, and these are the people who completed their exploration by 1870. And rest of the one was left for other people because it's very close to Africa, Europe. You come down through the coast and boat rides are not very long. It's easy to come to Africa from Europe. And Vasco da Gama, which is very considered very famous in India, found India. He found Chinese traders in Mozambique and Mombasa. So before the European discovery period, Chinese were already traveling all over the world. And not only Chinese, and there were other communities also traveling. The Indians were traveling, others were traveling. Okay. And the Chinese, Indian, and other Southeastern traders, they knew about Africa better than most of the Europeans did. So the European version of explorers is totally wrong and is mostly Eurocentric and church-centric view. The world was already discovered by Asians before, because how could you find Chinese traders in Africa? They're already there. Indian traders were all over the East Coast and the West Coast also. So they were already there. Spice trade was already booming. So if you see the world from European history and the Coptic history, then everything is very small and minuscule. So the Vasco da Gama took help from a Muslim trader to guide him to Calicut in India. And this was a major contribution of African Muslims to Portuguese traders. Okay. And then on August 28, 1498, King Manuel of Portugal informed the Pope, because he's reporting to Pope, that Portugal had reached India. And while coming back, Diogo Diaz discovered Madagascar. Madagascar is the name given by Portuguese, and who resisted Christian conversion activities extremely strongly. Okay, and so Madagascar in Africa was a strong Hindu country before, with which functioned seamlessly with local traditions. Okay. So the Portuguese Christian conversion missions were repulsed in Madagascar by the local Hindus and Buddhists, because locals did not believe in the conception of hell as spoken by both Muslims and Christians. Now, if in the entire African story there is no description of hell, you'll be shocked to know. The whole hell and heaven, punishment and reward came from Europeans generally. In Vedic culture, it is there, but based on your karma. It's not somebody else deciding for you. You are deciding your destination by yourself. That's a Vedic culture. You know? So now Europeans are controlling second wave of Christianization, Christianism there, controlling the entire Africa, controlling even the Muslims through money. And 10 million Africans suffered death under the European Christianism colonization in the last 400 years. I'm not even counting the related ones, just the main deaths. So not stopped, colonization is still going on. And many parts of Africa, these Islamism and Christianism groups are fighting today also to control the African land, resources, religion, culture. And the worst thing is they're not able to give up the colonized languages, which the African Union is trying very hard actually. So Tuareg, Tobu, Udabi, Ogoni, and these are the balkanization of Africa. So Winston Churchill, that was the biggest enemy of freedom of natives, because he thought that only German colonies need to be decolonized, not British colonies. So, but the British had to give up because they had no money. Even today, you see, it's very poor. Britain is getting poorer day by day because it is the main source of conflict in the entire world. Slowly now we don't know that. That small island nation is the main source of conflict nowadays. In the entire world, somewhere or the other, the British foots are there, British feet are there. So, Rwandan genocide was created by the church, Catholicism, and this fact is hidden from many news reports. Okay, the church elements worked with ethnic groups, and their missions played havoc with local people in Africa. We know the missions, what happened with the missions in USA and Canada. Children were tortured. Okay, and the missionaries engaged in war with local natives for the purpose of conversion and loot of the resources. So Africa had a very strong education system before Islamic and Christian invaders arrived on their shores. That was completely destroyed. It's a very sad story. Very sad story. The women were killed or sold without consideration of their age, continuing till date. Okay. So see, the Romans followed the Greeks, then Christians, and now the South and Southeastern Africa remained largely free from these attacks till very recently. Now they had started. Ethiopia, South Sudan, Madagascar, Zambia, and these are all influenced by the Indian Gujarati traders. And Vasco da Gama used the Gujarati trader to find the sea route to India from the Cape of Good Hope. Amun, Ra, Ptah, these are the Egyptian gods which can be connected to Indra, Chandra, Moon, Surya. You know, and the colonialism or imperialism did not end in Africa. The elites were brought in from Africa to European countries to learn about the European version of African history. And these are the people continued corruption. And through corruption, the church and the mosques ruled Africa. Till date, there are a lot of private armies there of the mosques, private armies of the churches. And the European states like France today controls completely 15 countries of African Union and UK through sanctions. Americans have used through sanctions. American military bases are in Africa. Okay, the many movies made on that, Black Hawk Down, many movies there, shows the problem of the European. I'm so amazed that why America is getting involved with the Europeans, why USA has to provide manpower to Europeans to continue the colonization, because USA itself got freedom from UK, but now they are becoming like a British second hand of the British. Why? It's the same Anglo-Saxon mindset going on, mindset. And when the Hindus say, "Oh, we are conservative," it's a laughable position. How can you be conservative? Hindus have to think. We are neither left nor right. We are Hindus. We are dharmic. So it is still going on. Like if you go, the 3,000 native tribes still remain in Africa now. 2,000 languages still remain in Africa. Tuareg, Dogon are the masters of astronomy. And in the North Sahara and Nigeria region, these are still not converted and they should not be converted. That's why I'm saying it loudly. The faith based colonialists, which is what Europe and America is today now, and Middle East also. While Middle East is reforming itself, I really welcome the step of Saudis to teach Ramayana, Mahabharata, and Yoga in Saudi Arabia, because they are now becoming part of the new world, which is more open and going away from barbarism in the previous version of Islamism attacks. So the change is happening. How fast will that be? We don't know. We don't know. So Yoruba, which is in southwest Nigeria, Ashanti, which is in Ghana, Benga, which is in Congo, and they are still fighting for their survival from the local governments and the followers of critical faith theory. Hamer in Ethiopia, Karo, they make very good body painting work. Masai in Nile Basin, and Nile Basin. And Hadzabe in East Africa and Datoga, famous for their weapon making skills. These are the natives need protection from their own governments and also international bodies for their language, beliefs, and the culture of worship. They need that protection. Then San, which is Kalahari natives from Botswana, Angola, and Zimbabwe. Khoi Khoi, Nam, Zulu, which is natives from Indian Ocean coast of South Africa, famed for their war fighting skills, and Himba, natives from Namibia. They have also been fighting to protect their language, traditions, and beliefs. Sandawe natives from Oldue Gorge in the eastern Serengeti in modern day Tanzania, equatorial regions. So they are also in danger today. So there are many people in danger due to the invading Islamism and Christianism from Europe and Middle East. And the San people in South Africa were actually hunted like animals. They mentioned that. And these human hunters used to go to church and never admit to a human murder, because the Europeans thought that the Africans are not humans. This is a basic thought. Same thing with Islamism. Okay. So there are many hunter-gatherer. It's not bad. I don't believe hunter-gatherer is bad, because that's the way a native tribe lives. May not be doing the right thing. Even in Mahabharata Ramayana, they were never persecuted. They were taught a better lesson. Like for example, Valmiki was a hunter. Nalad Muni spoke to him and then he gave up. But then he became Valmiki Rishi. So not a condemned position, not a permanent position. We read his books, Valmiki Ramayana. So now the hunter-gatherer and the so many countries in Africa coming together to protect these people. but not enough. Some outside influence has to do. Countries like India and China have to step up to protect the native cultures. But Europeans won't do that. Is India and China can do that. Why I say China? Because China has is a cousin of India. Their culture comes from India. And some places they've taken a very good decision in Africa, by the way. So some things good have to be appreciated. Europeans have not taken good decision at all. They have just been in religious zeal to convert to get increase in numbers. And they have done the maximum damage. So Europeans must get out of Africa everywhere. And USA must also get out of Africa. Not good for them to be engaged in this kind of activities. So most of the wildlife game reserves are built on native lands in Kenya, South Africa, Botswana, Tanzania, and many other countries in Africa. And rarely that money reach the natives on whose land such game reserves are built. So the land of natives has been acquired, and the game reserves are built, but that money never reaches the local natives over there. Okay? And these natives, converted ones, are used to convert the others. And so the time of the early colonial powers, I'm writing in my own book, I'm quoting my own book, Cold, Glory, and God, because you won't find this version of history because the universities won't teach you. They give you data. And what I've done is I've created a story out of the data. So it's a data driven story. Therefore, my book cannot be questioned by anyone. It's built on data and numbers. So approximately 21 million Africans today are converting the rest of Africa. 21 million is a number. So 21 million preachers in Africa preaching Islam and Christianity further to the natives to convert them, destroy their language. And only countries like India and China can help. We need China, we need India, both of them, because these are the two new superpowers of the world. Gone are the days, and Russia also their friend. Russia is the friend of China and India, and the West and the USA. Somehow USA has lost the way, I think, an ethical way. So native people lands have been used for large-scale agriculture, livestock farming, and mining. In Africa, native people face a lot of problems ranging from marginalization. There is no one to take care of them. African governments are made so much corrupt by the Europeans and the Middle Easterns that there is no money left. Hopefully, Saudi Arabia starts correcting the history. Hopefully. And poverty, AIDS, HIV was purposely spread by not controlling it deliberately. So more and more people die, natives die. That was the whole point. Illiteracy was spread so that the exploitation can be increased. So the critical faith theory came in the way because critical race theory is not important. Critical faith theory is important. That my faith is better than yours. You know? For education purposes to Africa, to convert natives, thereby destroying their native beliefs and traditions. So many European and American researchers considered Africans as subhuman species. It's an information, it's a fact. And so they captured the natives of Africa for skull experiments, checking the skull and trying to see how much brain power they have. Are they human or not? That's a research. And sometimes even exhuming people from the graves to perform experiments on exhumed skulls. So, you know, African anthropology is being studied by Europeans. Why not Africans study European anthropology? European anthropology needs to be studied also. Whether they have big enough brain power or what makes them so evil. That's what we need to study also. And most of this research was fraudulent to generate funds for academic and medical researches. So the Western academic researcher would be paid a huge sum of money to justify the cost borne by Western taxpayer, while the German settlers forced native tribes into the interior of Southwest Africa. Uh, and the like, if you look at the history there, the German settlers were forced into native tribes for Southwest Africa and also treated Africans as mere test subjects. Mere test subjects. Okay, and the if you look at the papers published in the German medical journals, you will see the skull measurements to justify calling Africans Untermenschen, Untermenschen, subhumans, and the graves were robbed. History. Okay, so if you think that only the British were wrong, I'm talking about Germans here too. And so this is the history of African purposely kept unstable by the church-based governments of Europe and America for further exploitation of their resources. So German settlers and also armed forces in the World War II murdered more than 75,000 local natives belonging to Herero Nama tribes in southwest Africa. The atrocities of Europeans and Americans, Middle Easterns on Africa is an untold story, and everything what you know about the African poverty, you should be ashamed. People who did it are mostly belonging to well-off homes, rich homes in Europe, UK, Canada, USA, Australia. People are living here. And the biggest problem is the rest of the world is silent. China is silent. India is the only country which has voiced for the independence of natives of Africa. So the only friend remains is India and probably China, because China is fighting the Europeans. China is not doing on the basis of principles. China is doing on the basis of protecting its own interests, economic interests from Europeans and Americans. But India is not at that big economic force in Africa today, but still it is a major one, but helping it on the basis of principles. And if you look at the non-aligned movement of the global south, and many of the African nations have joined with global south to protect themselves again from Europeans, Americans, the Vatican Church, and the mosques, to protect their own civilization. The story is still continuing. Nothing has stopped. Okay? If you are pained by hearing this, when you read my book, you'll be even more shocked. Okay? So, anyway, so the slave trade in USA, many of the ex-presidents of USA were proud slave owners. That's a shame of United States, actually. So there is a very famous African leader. His name is Malachi Postle Thwaite. He's a political economist. Put it in 1745, he wrote. And the impression that Africans are not intelligent was also spread by the Europeans. And my experience is one of the smartest people on the planet, very honest people on the planet. It's my experience, not a view. So, British trade is a magnificent superstructure of American commerce and naval power on an African foundation. This is, if you read the statement again, this is done by an African actually, a political economist in 1745. British trade is a magnificent superstructure of American commerce and naval power on an African foundation. If it was not Africa, there would be no money to fight the World War I or World War II in the UK. So UK fought the wars, or the Europeans fought the wars built on African money, Asian money, and South American they had already finished before that. It's the largest continent of the world, and also second largest actually. The largest is Asia. The second largest continent of the world, and also the most rich continent of the world, and the next superpower if these European, American, and Asian politics stays out of it. And for that, Africans have to learn their history and then, on the basis of intelligence, make policies that will stop this religious destruction of Africa. So, the most of the bullets in the World War II and many future wars, even now, come from raw material produced from Africa. So Africa was a theater of war in World War I as well as World War II. And the civilian casualty on Africans was never assessed and fairly compensated for. Ideally, Britain should sell off whatever they have to give it to, part of it give it to Africa and part of it give it to India and other countries, ideally. And the Spanish monarchy must be abolished in any way, because that is the biggest cause of colonial and human rights violations all over the world. I have no interest in either going to Spain or Britain in any way, so I can speak. So Africa is a continent of multiple native cultures. It's on page 113 of my book, Native Americans, Gold, Glory, and God. And very friendly coexistence exists if you go to the natives in African nations and many African countries. So this is my book. It's a very beautiful continent, Africa, a cradle of human civilization, wonderful people, and their native cultures must be preserved. And by the way, United Nations doesn't do any work in any way. It has to be abolished. It has become a European tool or American tool for regime changing wars all over the world. You know, we are living in a lot of problems, and education is the only solution. So I will take some questions here, and people can ask me. And I really like most of you are silent. It looks very odd to me. So anyway, thank you so much. And MJ, thank you very much. And Sanjeev Sharma ji, thank you for joining, becoming a member of YouTube channel. And I encourage most of you to support us like Sanjeev ji is doing. Icha Blaze, thank you very much. Nikhil, thank you. Srinivas Rao ji, thank you very much. And so it's an important discussion. If you have any questions or comments, you can ask me right now. I'll be happy to answer on Africa, because Indians are not aware of Africa. We have ignored Africa, even though our ancestors followed Africa. And the rich and many Indian companies are like the MTN and the cell phone companies are one of the biggest companies in Africa. So I would like to hear from you. Dilip Pawar saying Har Mahadev. If you have any questions, you can ask me. And or if you don't have, then we are already past the hour. We are 1 hour 24 minutes. And it's been a long show. And I started a little late, 5 minutes. Normally I'm never late, but I was lazy today. Thank you all for joining. And now we are going to thank you and namaste. Jai Jagannath. Keep watching. Join the Lit Fest in San Diego, August 25-26. If you're in San Diego, and you can always contact me. And if you want to organize my book launches, any of your towns, I'll be happy to come and speak over there. Namaste.